course material, or course resources, exam 2 topics. The first page is everything from the first exam. We will start at the second page. And here's what we have to talk about. Statutory tax incidents. What is this? This is what the law says. The law says who has to pay the tax. Your employer has to pay your payroll taxes on behalf of you. Right? They take it out of your paycheck, they pay the federal government. Who actually pays the tax is the actual tax incidence. And that's the tax burden. What is that dependent on?
Elasticity.
The elasticity of the demand curve and the supply curve matter, right? So that's the next topic here, taxes and elasticity. Next we have the average tax rate and the marginal tax rate. Which one of these determines whether or not a tax is progressive, flat, or regressive? Is it the average or the marginal?
What was the question again?
Which do we use to determine whether a tax is regressive, progressive, or flat? Is it the average tax rate or the marginal tax rate?
Average.
It's the average. So if the average goes up as income goes up, the tax is progressive. If the average goes down as income goes down, then the tax is regressive. The next 3 topics are included in an equation that's an equality, right? So the tax rate times the tax base equals the tax revenues. We can take a look at the Laffer curve, which is then a graph of how tax revenues respond to changes in the tax rate, right? Chicago's doing a very bad job of this right now with cigarettes. They're getting in trouble. They've raised the tax so high that their revenues are actually going down. On a similar note, although it's not the exact same thing, they also really mispredicted what was going to happen when they put up red light cameras and speeding cameras around the city. They expected it to generate tens of millions of dollars more than it has. They didn't think that people would actually learn to stop speeding and stop blowing red lights at the places that have cameras. So the city's got a big hole in its budget right now because that was money it was counting on, right? And then the last thing is you should be able to draw the market effects of taxes and subsidies. We put both on which curve? Supply, right? Taxes and subsidies go on the supply curve. Why? Because that gives us the market price that includes the tax or the subsidy. All right, next, moving on to difficult cases for the market and the role of government. Conditions of economic efficiency. This is somewhat of a review from previous sections. That economic efficiency occurs when total surplus is maximized. That occurs at equilibrium, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Marginal benefit curve. Which curve is that? Demand. Marginal cost curve. Which curve is that? It's not demand. It's supply, right? Both of these show the marginal benefits and the marginal costs for the individuals they represent. So the marginal benefit is for all the individuals in the market who are potential consumers. The marginal cost curve shows all the potential suppliers, their marginal cost. The social benefit, right, which if these goods have social benefits, that is not shown on the demand curve, right? That's a positive externality that occurs somewhere else. Marginal cost does not include any possible social cost, which could be negative externality, right? So we'll talk more about that in a second. Government has 2 main functions. The protective function. This is to protect your individual rights and your property rights. They say possession's 9/10 of the law, right? The government has to be trusted to enforce these rights. There are plenty of places in the world that have laws similar to the United States, but that you can't really depend on a legal system to help you enforce your property rights. If somebody welches on a contract right, that you have signed with them, you have the reasonable expectation that you can take them to court to enforce that contract. That's a protective function of government. The productive function of government is government does produce goods on occasion, right? We have public parks, we have public schools, we have the post office, we have the military, and the good the military produces is national defense. Market consequences. These are four things that may lead to the invisible hand not working correctly, or a market failure, as we sometimes refer it to. The first is a lack of competition. If there's not enough competition in an industry, we don't believe that it'll reach an efficient outcome. If there are externalities, again, these are marginal costs that are borne by third-party individuals, or marginal benefits that are given to third-party individuals that are neither the buyer nor the seller, right? Public goods. Public goods are goods that suffer from the free rider problem. They are non-rivalrous and non-excludable, right? So if we simply tried to count on everybody chipping in to pay for a military, we probably wouldn't get enough money to have a military, right? We need to somehow tax individuals and then pay for these public goods. Otherwise, nobody would. And then poor information. This one has gotten a lot better because of the internet. Right? Before you go shopping, let's say you're going to go out and buy a big screen TV. Before you go shopping for one, what do? Check prices online. And then when you go to the store, you have a reasonable expectation of what the price of those goods is going to be. And if it's much higher than that, you're not going to buy it. When there is poor information, there are things that can pop up to help us. One is consumer reviews. Simply the reviews you see from an online website, right? Amazon reviews. That helps you make a decision. We use our networks, right? If you're looking for a dentist, it's not unreasonable for you to put a post on Facebook and say, hey, I live here, does anybody know a good dentist in the area, right? We can use our networks to help us gain information. We can also gain information about goods supplied through branding, right? There are certain brands that all of us trust. There are brands we don't trust. And then individual companies, in order to assure you of the quality of their good, they can offer you a warranty, right? And so if you believe, okay, I can buy this good, and if something goes wrong with it, I know that I'll be covered for this amount of time, and I believe the company will still exist when it's time to collect the warranty, right? Some people don't care about this. My father is a good example. He bought all the appliances, all new appliances for his house the last day Montgomery Ward existed, right? He went to Montgomery Ward, bought all these appliances, and now none of them have warranties because the company doesn't exist anymore. So he's got a lot of duct tape on his fridge, and a microwave you have to hold close, right? Right, he was looking to save a buck by not having a warranty. This is actually a typo here, characteristics of, this should say public goods, not market goods, and that is that they are non-rivalrous and non-excludable, and that they suffer from the free rider problem. Next, we can move down to preferences and budgets. So we have three assumptions we make about consumer preferences: that they are complete, right? That means that any good you put in front of me, I can make a decision about, right? I can rank it amongst other goods. Transitivity means that I can put them in order, right? This is more ranking. If I like good A better than good B, and I like good B better than good C, I also like good A better than good C, right? That's the transitivity property. And then non-satiation simply means that we're always willing to take more of a good, because more of a good, even though it might have a very low marginal utility, it will always have a positive marginal utility. We'll always prefer more to less. All right, then we started drawing our utility curves, right? Also called indifference curves. When we put them on our indifference map, right? They are curves that represent a given level of utility. The slope of this curve is the marginal rate of substitution. It's how much of a good we're willing to trade for another good. We then looked at different types of indifference curves for not just goods, but also bads and neuters, right? Bads are things that when you get more of them, you have to be rewarded with more of a good to keep the same utility. Our go-to example was smog and income. So for you to work in Beijing, I have to pay you more because you have to deal with more smog. Neuters are things that you don't care about at all. They don't decrease your utility, they don't increase your utility. And so when neuters end up, when we put them on one of the axes, we either get horizontal indifference curves or vertical indifference curves. They make no difference to us. Perfect substitutes. These have indifference curves that are linear, right? We have a set amount that we will always trade one for the other. The go-to example of this was nickels and dimes. Right? I will always trade 2 nickels for a dime. I will always trade 1 dime for 2 nickels. I don't care. I'm just as happy. Somebody was telling me today, because we were talking about patents in my other class, that the iPhone won their battle against Samsung. The iPhone patented this shape of a rounded rectangle for a phone, which I think is kind of silly that they can patent a shape. So Samsung was ordered to pay $1 billion to Apple. They appealed and got it knocked down to $750 million. But one of my students told me, and I haven't fact-checked this, but if it's true, it's hilarious, that Samsung is paying Apple in dimes. That they are sending them a shipment of dimes every month for the amount that they have to pay each month for whatever the period of time is. I think that's great. So that might actually not be a perfect substitute, right? I don't know what you would do with $750 million in dimes, unless you're like Scrooge McDuck. You're going to go swimming in it, right? So that might actually make things difficult. But that's how they've chosen to pay. And dimes are legal tender for all debts, public and private, right? So they have to be accepted. They can't claim that they weren't paid. They're getting paid in dimes. All right. Complements. These have L-shaped curves, right? Some of you appeared to have some trouble on the quizzes with this. Keep in mind that these L-shaped curves, we have good A and good B. If they're perfect complements and I need them 1-to-1, then if I have one of each, I'm this happy. If I get any more of good B, I don't get any happier. If I get any more of good A, I don't get any happier. I can only move to a higher indifference curve if I get one more of each. Now this ratio is not always 1-to-1. And on your quiz questions, there are other examples, right? There's one where there's a cup of coffee for 8 ounces of coffee, 1 ounce of cream, and then there's one with Cookie Monster, and a given number of cookies and a given amount of milk. Okay, so those are our utility curves. Next, we have to add the budget constraint. So the utility curves just tell you about how happy you would be given a hypothetical amount of 2 different goods. The budget constraint tells you what you can actually afford. So the budget constraint is constructed from, you need to have knowledge of your income and you need to have knowledge of the price of the 2 goods in question. And then you can draw a budget constraint. This shows you everything that you can afford. Once you draw the budget constraint, you find the area where, you find the point, where the budget constraint and the indifference curve share tangency. will happen at one point, unless you get a corner solution, right? A corner solution can occur at not tangency, bless you. So the optimal point to consume when it's not a corner solution is at tangency. This means that we're setting the marginal rate of substitution equal to the price ratio between the two goods. And we'll see that that then also sets the marginal utility per dollar spent equal for all goods that you buy. An income shift, right? If the prices of the goods don't change, an income shift will simply shift the budget constraint outward, keeping the same slope. If the price of one of the goods changes, it will pivot along the axis, around the point on the axis for the other good, right? So we've seen this. So changes in income shift the budget constraint, changes in prices of goods pivot the budget constraint around a point on one of the axes. All right. Then we're going to keep going with the consumer choice and utility, marginal benefit and the marginal rate of substitution. And so the marginal benefit that we get from something is equal to the marginal rate of substitution. And then we can look at the marginal cost being equal to the price ratio, and that's how much we have to pay for the good in terms of the other good. So if we set the marginal benefit equal to the marginal cost, it's the same as doing all of the stuff we've done before, which is setting the marginal rate of substitution equal to the price ratio, which is the same as setting the marginal utility per dollar spent on each good equal for all goods. Right? We have a bunch of things that are all equivalent that show us where the optimal consumption point is. We talked about